Hey guys, today's video is a reaction to Kazoom's tweet saying, interesting questions David is asking here. Is the era of college ending? And it has a link to David Pakman show video. But I have some thoughts on this. I watched David Pakman's video, and I have to agree that the value of a college degree has gone down in my lifetime, right? And some of the things that you can see right away if you were to do some lay research, I'm talking like you can see this right now. Go on Indeed.com, right? And then search whatever city you're living in and master's degree, right? So these are the jobs that would require a master's degree. Then look at the range of pay on the side and see like the $30,000 level a year, and click on it, and then click on some of the links to that, and you'll see that it's not just master's degree preferred that they happen to write at the bottom of the description for the job. A lot of them are master's degree required, right? So you take the amount of money that somebody makes with a master's degree required job at that level, right? At the $30,000 to $40,000 a year level. Take their hourly wage, right? And then subtract what they pay for their student loan, out of their pay, and you find that they're actually making, in many cases, especially in big cities, less money than the prevailing minimum wage. And when I say prevailing minimum wage, it's not just like the federal minimum wage and then the state's minimum wage on top of that. In my city of Denver, you can go to Amazon distribution centers and get $15 an hour with no education beyond a high school diploma, right? You can make $20 an hour as an Uber driver if you have a clean driving record. So, that a licensed clinical social worker is being offered a job at around $17 an hour doesn't make sense, because this person decided to better themselves, go get a bachelor's degree, then go get a master's degree, then go for years working to get their clinical hours, and then passed a standard licensing test, turned it all into the licensing board, got their license, and they have to maintain their license, and stay in good standing and not have any, things besmirching them like a criminal record, stuff like that. They are trying to better themselves, and yet the pay that they are offered by many different employers is less than minimum wage if you take into account all of the expense that they have in just getting those credentials. So yes, there is a problem with higher education these days. The only thing that it gets you in these circumstances is more variety of job that you can do. If you'd like a desk job that requires a master's degree, then you have to go through the education and put that extra burden of cost on you, versus a trade job, where you're doing manual labor and possibly making even more money than somebody who is far better educated than you, but it's harder to attract people to those trade jobs that aren't desk jobs, that aren't cush, So, I can see over the course of my lifetime that higher education has not panned out for many different fields, but for some, it still does pan out. I see nurses as being overpaid in many circumstances, but I don't hate on them. They're getting paid what I feel higher education should get you paid. but other people with the same level of education, bachelor's versus bachelor's, extra licensing hours versus extra licensing hours, other fields are not getting paid what nurses are getting paid when they're doing similarly stressful work. And, that field is still kicking it. Electricians versus carpenters, electricians are still maintaining a pretty good rate of pay, and carpenters, their union's broken all over the country. The last really good unions are the pipe fitters and the electricians in America, and I don't know how long they're going to be able to hold out on their last gasps as they get broken as well. My last employer, before the one that I moved on to very recently, actually had a system whereby the pay that they would offer people through their HR was based on the months of experience somebody had in the field rather than how much education they had. And before I left that job, I did find out that because I transitioned in my career from being an electrician for, a good 20 years to being, working in the behavioral fields, I was at a disadvantage. Even though I have a bachelor's degree, I'm in grad school right now, people who only had a high school diploma were being offered more pay than me because of the system that the HR had, where they were rewarding years of service, months of service in that field as they were making the initial offers for pay. So I found out that the $5 or so an hour I was making more for working overnight was about the same as what somebody was making, because they were offered more pay than me on the day shift, whereas I had a bachelor's degree and they had the same state licensing but no bachelor's degree. So sometimes when it takes you longer to get your degree in your life, you look at people who go to college straight out of high school and they spend years of their life attaining a higher education degree. Those years of service within the field, if they didn't maintain a job in the field, if they were working at Starbucks while they were going to college, that can actually put them at a disadvantage for what kind of pay they're going to be offered. And there's also an effect of some people find it very easy to collect butt time in a chair in school, but in the field, they suck donkey balls. They are horrible workers. They have no work ethic instilled within them because they were in academia and not working the type of job that they went to school for. And so there are intangibles that you need to be able to detect in a job interview, but very often are indetectable even in the job interview and during the orientation week where they're getting paid to learn. And then, in the first 2 months afterwards, you find out, oh my goodness, this person has all of this on paper credentialing, but they suck at their job. And the more that happens, the more employers are less likely to look at higher education as something that they should weight in hiring decisions. They're more likely to want to hire contractors to give people a probationary period where they can decide whether or not they want to hire them after seeing how they perform on the job for a little while versus hiring people just based on how good their resume looks. So, the more that work ethic is not instilled in people, the worse this gets. There's plenty of people who want that cushy desk job that actually, they don't want to work. They just want to get money and not have to be very stressed about how much money is coming their way. They want to have this easy job, and the reality is employers want you to produce, and just because you get a higher education degree doesn't mean that you should have to work less or produce less at your job. You're just doing a different type of job that would have maybe a different valuation, and hopefully having that degree allows you to produce more because you learned something along the way that raises your level of production. But in many cases, employers are finding that no, those degrees do not equate to the amount of production you would want from them for the extra pay that they're trying to demand. So, in the case of computer science, somebody who has a computer science master's degree from 1980 is regarded as being less valuable than someone has their Microsoft certifications, their MCSEs, done in the past year with no degree. Because that person is more up to date on the latest trends in technology than the person who got their degree years and years ago. So many fields are turning to yearly tests that you have to take that make sure that you're up to date on the latest technology and you actually know your shit and you're not just resting on the laurels of, one time, a long time ago, I went into debt by putting my butt in a chair and sat through a whole bunch of courses, and now you should be paying me more money. No. You actually got to stay up on it, and you have to prove that you stayed up on it. For my field in counseling, there are required continuing education credits that you have to get. So every 2 years, I have to get like 40 hours registered of like going to conferences that are giving out continuing education credit certificates, or I have to take some college courses, or read a book and do a book report. There's different ways to earn these credits, but you have to stay up on what is going on in your field, and it's part of the requirement of licensure, because that's what makes us more valuable is keeping up with that kind of stuff. So that's why the requirement's baked in to even having a license. What I will say about my college experience, though, that is also not in David Pakman's video, is that I went to my undergrad degree 10 years after I graduated high school. Right? I went to the Army. That delayed it by about 6 years. But I finished my undergrad degree 10 years after I graduated high school. Right? Many times in my classes, I felt like what I was learning in my undergrad degree was an echo of what I had already learned in high school. And I don't know if it was that I went to a fantastic high school that was preparing me for college, or if college had gotten dumbed down in those years that I spent delaying my entry into college by being in the Army. But I really did feel like the people around me were remedial level. They needed to go back to high school, right? And I felt like the amount of learning that I was actually doing was dependent on me actually going above and beyond and researching things that I wanted to know. 10 years later, I go back to school and I'm doing grad school, and at least the schools have caught up technology-wise as far as being on the same level as the students. Because when I got my undergrad degree, I finished it in 2008. Around the 2004, 2005, 2006 era, they were not as skilled at catching plagiarism of people just ripping things out of Wikipedia and throwing it into their assignments. And when I would see people's work, I would be like, oh my goodness, you didn't even change the font to be able to hide what you did, you know? And I would see plagiarism in people's works because there was so much information at our fingertips, but the instructors were ancient. You know, they were not as tech savvy as the students. Now, 10 years later, it seems like the instructors are tech savvy. There are protocols in place to catch plagiarism that, as you submit an assignment online into their system, it gets checked for plagiarism right away by an outside contractor, you know. The type of assignments that they require are not as assisted by the technology of the internet having all this information at your fingertips. So the majority of my classes that I've been taking in grad school, the grades are more dependent on persistence, right? So if you regularly post in discussion threads, it's required of me that I'll do an initial post by one day, and then I have to do follow-up posts by another day, and then respond to the follow-up posts on my thread by another day. And you have to be persistent each week and meet all of the deadlines in your posting. 60% of most of the classes is just that, staying up on these discussion posts, right? 60% of what's graded. To me, it really feels like they have turned college, the college experience, into something for the Facebook age. Like, you can comment on Facebook and have discussions on Facebook about topics that you're passionate about. Now take that and apply that to your college work. So the discussion threads, they have devolved into basically long form Facebook posts, you know, just in a different forum. And the amount of work that I see being done on them is just glorified Facebook posts. If you were arguing Star Wars versus Star Trek with somebody on Facebook for a 10 post thread, you can get a 4.0 in grad school these days. You know, it's more about who puts their nose to the grindstone and sets a good schedule and maintains it and keeps all of their assignments coming in on time than it is your actual talent at research, your actual ability to do a job. It's more, can you take what you already do in social media and apply it to the topic of the class? And it's a different kind of dumbing down that I am seeing. The reason why right now I am holding a 4.0, I feel, is because my classes are set to the difficulty level of millennials. and I've had to go above and beyond and supplement my own education by following up on the topics that are being talked about, because I just have this feeling of it's not an imposter syndrome. It's all the other students in the class are imposters, by and large. There are a few good candidates that I would probably hire for a practice that I would go to later, but many of them I feel are just being coddled by the difference in academic rigor that I have seen required of different programs throughout my time in education. And I feel like some of them would fail at my high school that I went through 20 years ago. So yeah, that's part of the reason why these degrees are not as worth as much, because it does not take as much to get them. More online diploma mills are opening up, giving life experience and giving people credit for things that they do not deserve credit for, if you're going to use degrees as the separating margin between good employee candidates and exceptional employee candidates. If you're trying to use a degree to divine whether or not somebody's going to perform on the job, you are at a loss. You really need to bone up on your interview skills if you want your company to succeed, because the college experience is not preparing people for producing good work for you. The college experience is more geared towards equalizing the playing field and making sure that everyone has access to all the jobs, instead of actually being gatekeepers and saying, no, you know what, maybe this person isn't suited for this field. Instead, the great gatekeeper of college is people's ability to persevere through all of the assignments and keep up their weekly routine. And the biggest decider of whether or not they can do that is themselves. People dropping out of their own accord, even though they're being coddled, they'll say, oh my goodness, this is far too much work. They drop out on their own. There's no instructor board that says, oh, this person is just never going to make it, in this career. No. It's more down to people who have been coddled and coddled and coddled, then deciding, oh my goodness, this is still too hard. Even at, a less rigorous academic requirement. And, that's the reason why degrees aren't worth as much. Take out some of the credits that used to be hard science math requirements and, research requirements, statistics classes, stuff like that, and replace them with I'll say social justice, equality, diversity, and world news, cultural awareness, stuff like that, sexual harassment prevention. These are the things that colleges are teaching now in place of, can you math? Do you know how to use a slide rule? Do you know how to use measuring tape? Do you know how to convert metric to standard? Do you know how to actually perform on a job. Can you convert different equations to find the solution that you are looking for? Can you read a study to see if somebody has been manipulating their numbers and just going for something that was a p-value manipulation, to where their sample size was very small, and they were just running the numbers to find if any strange correlation popped out of their study, and then it just happened to show up in a journal, and then it's not going to be replicated ever, and you're going to go on some strange voodoo mission in life, thinking that this one study was good enough for you to say that Reiki and aura work is something that you should recommend your clients when you have a PhD in psychology. And that was actually down a rabbit hole of a personal experience of mine. But, what they are teaching now is different, and what they need to be teaching in every undergrad degree experience, and I would say even further back into high school, the biggest thing that they could teach that would give the best bang for the buck would be critical thinking skills. And this is something that I've added to my own education by being here on this YouTube community. And I feel like what I've picked up as far as critical thinking skills, and then followed up on that myself, has been far more advantageous to me than anything else that I have learned along the way in all of my years of going through education and trade schools. Critical thinking skills, of all the different things that they could add to the curriculum in higher education courses, that's the one thing that I find so lacking. It's more political decisions about what we should know than teaching people how to think for themselves. And that's why degrees are not worth as much, and that's why people can't come to their own conclusions about why having a good work ethic is actually valuable to their employer, to the world, and people expect that they will just get this piece of paper and their life will be smooth sailing from there. And that's not the case. You pick up that credential, you pick up that degree in order to be able to do future hard work. You don't get the degree so that your life will be easy. You get it so that you are able to continue to do hard work and do better work. That's all I got for today. It's probably a really long ramble video, so comment below if you agree or disagree.